I'm Misa. If you're a longtime viewer, then you're used to me mentioning my chronic illness, CIRS, or just my hatred towards mold. Today, I figured I'd make an informative video going over CIRS since it's not that well known, and in fact, the average doctor would tell you they'd never even heard of it. So what better way to spread awareness than through a YouTube video? So for starters, what even is CIRS? Well, CIRS, or CIRS, is known as Chronic Inflammatory Response Syndrome. It's also known as toxic mold illness. Basically, someone with this condition becomes extremely ill when exposed to mold, especially over a prolonged period of time. CIRS is a genetic condition in which a person's body cannot get rid of mold mycotoxins that are released through mold spores and into the air, which can be absorbed through breathing, skin contact, and through eating food which mold spores have touched. These toxins build up in a person's body and then cause an autoimmune type response as the body attacks itself in an effort to deal with these mycotoxins in the body. While normal people can get rid of these toxins on their own, people with CIRS, their bodies generally struggle to get rid of these toxins. This process leads to a laundry list of symptoms a person can have due to the mold exposure and the collection of it in the body. We're talking about chronic sinusitis, headaches, migraines, stomach problems, develop food sensitivities, hives, foggy memory, insomnia, sometimes tachycardia, joint and muscle pain, floaters in your vision, excessive urination, dizziness, chronic fatigue, chronic pain, and so much more. For most people, they never get a diagnosis with CIRS and live with a lot of those symptoms often being labeled as having maybe fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue, or just the symptoms on their own as a problem. If the exposure to the mold persists, and as these symptoms progress, it can lead to job loss and even disability in some cases for some people. While I was extremely lucky in my journey to find out what was going on with me, and ended up finding out that the primary care doctor I saw actually knew and treated CIRS, often treatment requires seeing a naturopath or functional type of doctor, which is difficult for many people because usually they're all out of pocket and don't take insurances. But in my research, non-traditional doctors seem to be the ones that tend to have some sort of treatment system and a better knowledge base of this condition. Now, you might be asking yourself, well then, how do you know or find out if you have this condition if most doctors are unaware of it? For one, people that are desperate in chronic illness situations tend to do a lot of research online, just really trying to find out what's going on in their bodies, and this can lead to them coming across CIRS literature or specialists. The other is that when nothing seems to work, people are willing to try out different solutions, which can lead them to naturopathic and functional doctors or non-traditional doctors that may lead them to a diagnosis. I will have to pause here and say that I find this really frustrating. I really wish it was more recognized and that there were more traditional doctors that would test for and treat this condition. I know just from my experience, even though I did eventually get help, it took months and many specialists telling me that I was fine and nothing was wrong with me, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me while I was deteriorating and losing my ability to almost function normally. I would have suffered less if more doctors knew about this condition. Now, back to the topic. How do you find out? Well, there are several tests that you can take to figure out if you have mold exposure or the condition. So there are two schools of thought when it comes to the treatment and diagnostic protocols for CIRS. One is the original protocol from the Schumacher protocol, which focuses on biotoxin elimination and system correction. The other is a newer approach, the integrated and complementary approach, which focuses more on holistic and alternative therapies. With the Schumacher approach, you take an assembly of dozens of blood tests to check for certain biomarkers, as well as if you have the gene susceptible to having CIRS. You often take a vision test, as well as test your living environment for mold using a specialized mold testing procedure known as the IRMI test. These tests and biomarkers will inform the doctor if you're suffering from CIRS and how much mold you are living in, as well as what type of molds you're exposed to. For the integrated approach, sometimes they will use some of the same tests from the Shoemaker protocol, such as the IRMI, to determine mold exposure, but it's often common there that they will have you do a urinalysis test, which tests for mold exposure and toxins in the body through the way of urine. And this will determine, again, your exposure, what kind of molds you're exposed to, and what kind of treatment you will need. So, what do you do now that you have mold exposure? Well, depending on the protocol your doctor uses, it's often a lengthy and complex set of tasks you have to do. Commonly between both of them, first is leaving the mold environment. Commonly between both, the first thing is leaving the mold environment. This is often moving, or mold remediation can be tried, but it depends on the level of mold exposure in the living environment, your ability to get rid of all the mold, the sources of mold, and the level of spreading the mold spores around the living environment. For example, when I was sick, I thought I had identified the source, and then I had a remediation company come and treat the problem. For me, a combination of not great treatment protocol, which remediation should be very sterile, follow strict protocols, seal up everything well, as well as I think there were more than what I thought and couldn't find, led to me just having to leave even though I did do remediation. Because again, mold is hard to find. It can be hidden behind walls, floorboards, and hard to reach areas. So for me, leaving was the only option because I kept getting sicker. The stressful part about escaping a moldy environment is finding a clean or low mold environment to move into. It's really hard to pre-test places such as apartments or houses for sale in such a short amount of time to see if a place is safe for you to move into. So oftentimes your best bet is to use visual tests, scent cues, and maybe even water detection monitors to figure out if there's some sort of mold in your new environment. On top of that, both schools of thought will tell you to throw away most of your possessions when you move to a clean environment. By this, I mean all porous items should be tossed out, and non-porous items should be thoroughly cleaned and closed, or like a 50% chance of cleaning multiple times in a borax wash solution. The idea here is that items you bring with you can harbor mold spores and toxins, and if you bring it into your new environment, you could be contaminating that new environment and have to do things all over again. I know for me, it was not financially feasible to get rid of everything I own, so I cleaned as much as I could in terms of the non-porous things. I cleaned clothes, but I did toss away a lot of things such as mattresses, paper-based things, plushies, blankets, plastic items, shoes, collectibles, a whole lot of stuff. But after that, it's about helping your body get rid of the toxins. With the Shoemaker protocol, it's taking a binder called cholestyramine, kind of restricting the food that you eat, taking some supplements, and hopefully over time, this helps your body get rid of those toxins. In the integrated approach, they may have you also take a binder, but more in supplemental form, and then suggest a variety of therapies such as hyperbaric chambers, sauna therapy, strict diets, and a variety of supplements, among other things. There's a lot of things that they do. Ideally, if you're out of mold and doing these procedures, that should help you get rid of the toxins out of your body, and you should over some months start to see less and less of the symptoms and start to feel better. Once better though, you then live a different life. One, always being aware of mold and listening to your body so that if symptoms flare, as mold is everywhere, you do some of the protocols over again to try to get that out of your body. And then you detox. The other is management of long-term symptoms. Because CIRS is like an autoimmune disease, that means that when you're in the thick of it, your body was attacking itself. So for some, even if the CIRS has been treated, there could be long-term damage that you will have to treat for the rest of your life. This could be things such as gastrointestinal problems, changes in the bladder, chronic diseases, chronic headaches, development of or appearance of other autoimmune diseases, and so forth. But dealing with that is a lot better than dealing with all of it at once and not knowing why. Well, I hope this video taught you something new, and if you or someone you know has been dealing with some chronic illness symptoms and are stuck with no answers as to why, I suggest looking up the CIRS symptoms and looking around your living space for signs of mold. You never know. Heck, even if you don't have mold isn't healthy for anyone, so always do routine checks for water damage and get them addressed quickly. So for example, leaks, flood and water damage created by storms, rain, all that kind of things, cracks and lack of caulking near sinks, tubs, and toilets, water drainage around homes, HVAC drip pans and drainage, windows, skylights, areas with musty and damp odors. And for heck's sake, check the humidity levels. Anything over 55%, run a dehumidifier. Trust me, even cool areas can run 70-75% or even more humidity. And around 55% or so is when mold can grow, as it's humid environment and it's a breeding ground for mold to develop. Anyways, well, I hope that was informative, and I'll see you in the next video.